They say the loudest sound in the world is the silence that follows a gunshot. I disagree. For me, the loudest sound was the subtle click of my wife's blazer button hitting the hardwood floor 8 months ago. My name is Raymond Colby. I'm 54, and I didn't build a multi-state pharmaceutical empire by being a victim of circumstance. I'm a student of logistics. I understand supply chains, risk management, and, most importantly, human patterns. Porsche, my wife of 12 years, thought she was a master of patterns. She thought I was just the aging bank that funded her Pilates-toned lifestyle and her obsession with high society optics. She was half right. I was the bank. But a bank always keeps its ledgers balanced. The text arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was finishing my second espresso. The notification lit up my phone. A photo of Porsche in a cream-colored silk dress, standing on a sun-drenched terrace in Maui. Beside her stood Reed Calloway, my junior business partner, a man I had personally mentored and kept out of bankruptcy twice. They were wearing leis, holding glasses of vintage Cristal, looking like a couple out of a luxury travel magazine. Then came the text, "Just married Reed in Maui. You're pathetic, by the way. Don't bother calling. My lawyers will be in touch about my half of the empire." Most men in my position would have felt their world collapse. They would have thrown the phone across the room, driven to the airport in a blind rage, or reached for a bottle of scotch. I didn't do any of that. I didn't even feel my heart rate increase. Instead, I set the phone face down on the granite island, took a slow sip of coffee, and walked to my home office. I opened my laptop. I didn't go to my email or my bank accounts. I went to a hidden, encrypted partition on my hard drive. The folder was simply named Contingency. Inside were 32 perfectly categorized documents. There were 19 time-stamped location logs showing Porsche's car at Reed's private residence on days she claimed to be at charity luncheons. There was a full forensic audit of Reed's personal finances, proving he was nearly $1.2 million in debt to the IRS and private lenders. Debts he had been hiding while using my business guarantees to float his lifestyle. And then there was the crown jewel, a recorded deposition from Victor Aldine, Porsche's own father. You see, Porsche inherited her vanity from her mother, but she inherited her greed from Victor. And Victor, a former federal prosecutor, has one rule: never back a losing horse. When I showed Victor the evidence of how Reed was embezzling from our shared firm to buy Porsche's secret gifts, Victor didn't defend his daughter. He defended the integrity of the contract. He helped me tighten the noose. I typed a one-word reply to her text, "Cool." Then I hit enter on a pre-written command. In an instant, the digital world Porsche inhabited began to evaporate. The American Express Centurion card? Deactivated. The shared cloud accounts where she stored her influencer content? Wiped. The biometric access to our Tribeca penthouse? Revoked. By the time she finished her second glass of champagne on that terrace, she was effectively a ghost in her own life. But the real work was just beginning. An hour later, my doorbell rang. It wasn't the police or a lawyer. It was Nikki Calloway, Reed's actual wife. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, clutching a canvas tote bag like a shield. She didn't know Porsche had married her husband yet, but she knew something was wrong. Reed had stopped paying their mortgage in Charlotte 3 months ago. "Mr. Colby," she said, her voice trembling, "I found a laptop. I think Reed is trying to steal your company." I gestured for her to come in. "I know, Nikki, but he's not just stealing my company. He's trying to steal my life. The good news is, I've already finished the paperwork to make sure he only inherits one thing." "What's that?" she asked. "Total, irreversible ruin." I replied. I spent the next 3 hours with Nikki and my lead attorney, Douglas Farr. We went through the flash drive she brought. It was a goldmine. Reed and Porsche hadn't just been having an affair. They had a 14-month exit strategy document. They had mapped out exactly how to trigger a morality clause in our partnership agreement to force me out of the CEO chair while Porsche stripped my personal assets in the divorce. They thought they were the predators. They thought I was the old, slow-moving prey, too busy with quarterly reports to notice the shadows at my heels. As Douglas scrolled through their plan, he let out a low whistle. "Ray, they actually wrote down the projected value of the Sedona house they were going to buy with your diverted funds. They even picked out the furniture." "Let them keep the furniture," I said, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Because by tomorrow morning, They won't even be able to afford the gas to get to Arizona. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was a call from a number I recognized, the front desk of my building. Mr. Colby? It's Roy. Well, Mrs. Colby is here. She's at the desk with a gentleman. They're demanding entry. She says her key fob isn't working. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile touching my lips. Tell her the locks haven't malfunctioned, Roy. Tell her the system simply no longer recognizes her as a resident. And Roy, record the conversation. I want to hear the exact moment the champagne wears off. I hung up and looked at Nikki. Ready to meet the newlyweds? But as I stood up, a new notification popped up on my screen. It was an urgent alert from my private investigator. Reed hadn't just been stealing money. He had made a massive, illegal move with a pharmaceutical shipment destined for the VA hospitals. A move that carried a mandatory federal prison sentence that he hadn't just betrayed me. He had handed me the keys to his prison cell. The lobby of the Colby building is a cathedral of glass and brushed steel. When I stepped out of the elevator with Nikki and my attorney, the scene was exactly what I had visualized. Porsche was screaming at Roy. Her face flushed a frantic shade of crimson that the Maui sun couldn't account for. Reed stood beside her, trying to maintain his alpha posture, but his eyes were darting toward the street, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Raymond! Porsche shrieked the moment she saw me. What is the meaning of this? This is my home. You can't just lock me out. I'll have you in court for the rest of your life. I didn't stop until I was 3 feet away. I didn't look at Porsche. I looked at Reed. Congratulations on the nuptials. Reed, I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics like a scalpel. Though I'm curious, how do you plan on supporting a second wife when you're currently $1.2 million in the hole with the IRS, and your Charlotte mortgage is 90 days past due? The color drained from Reed's face so fast it was almost comical. He glanced at Nikki, who stepped out from behind me. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Nikki? Reed whispered. The bank called Reed, Nikki said, her voice no longer trembling. It was cold. Ray showed me the exit strategy folder. I know about the Sedona house. I know about the diverted funds. Porsche stepped forward, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble. I don't care about his debts. We have a prenup. Raymond, half of the distribution firm is mine. That penthouse is half mine. You can't hide behind your lawyers. Actually, Porsche, Douglas Farr interrupted, stepping forward with a crisp blue folder. Your father, Victor Aldine, would disagree. We spent the morning together. He's already signed a formal affidavit. Since you entered into a bigamous marriage ceremony in Maui while our legal union remained intact, you triggered the bad faith clause in your prenuptial agreement. It's an ironclad forfeit of all marital assets. My father... What? Porsche staggered back. Her father was the only person she truly feared, the only one who could match her coldness. He doesn't like losers, Porsche, I said quietly, and he especially doesn't like people who steal from his associates. Reed tried to grab Porsche's arm to pull her away, but I wasn't done. The money is one thing, Reed, but you got greedy. You thought you could float your debts by tampering with the VA hospital shipments, diverting high-grade inventory to the black market. I leaned in closer, dropping my voice. The DEA is already at your office. My investigators handed over the shipping manifests an hour ago. That's not a civil suit. That's a federal felony. Reed's knees actually buckled. He reached for the marble counter to steady himself. In that moment, the business partner, who thought he could replace me, looked like exactly what he was. A small man who had climbed a ladder made of lies. You're pathetic. Porsche spat at me, her voice cracking. It was the only weapon she had left, that word. Maybe, I replied, but I'm a pathetic man with a home, a company, and a clean record. You're a woman who just married a man who is going to spend the next 15 years in a federal penitentiary, and you did it while wearing a dress I paid for. I turned to Roy. Call the police, Roy. Have these two removed for trespassing. They no longer have business in this building. As the sirens began to wail in the distance, I walked back toward the elevators. Porsche was shouting, a desperate, guttural sound as she realized her new life was nothing more than a cage of her own making. She had thought Maui was the beginning of her victory lap. She didn't realize it was the funeral for her reputation. That evening, I sat in my quiet penthouse with a glass of bourbon. The city lights were brilliant, indifferent to the drama of the day. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I knew it was her, probably using a burner or a friend's phone. "I'll destroy you, Raymond. You'll die alone." I didn't reply. I didn't save the number. I simply deleted the thread. A man who builds an empire knows that you don't win by being the loudest. You win by being the last one standing when the dust settles. I opened my laptop one last time and hovered the cursor over the Contingency folder. I didn't delete it. I moved it to a drive labeled Case Closed. Because in business and in life, the only thing more important than a plan is the discipline to execute it until the very end. Porsche and Reed wanted to play a game of shadows. They just forgot that I was the one who controlled the lights.